So, Spencer's first date.
Yeah, so anyways, she came over, brought coffee. And
That's nice of her.
That was nice of her. Done right there. And the plan was we were going to go up to Mount Hood. She was going to get a lesson. I was going to go...
Skiing lesson.
Snowboarding lesson.
Snowboarding lesson.
And I was going to go snowboard by myself, like, and do all the fun runs before, like, her classes ended. Because I knew afterwards we'd be stuck on, like, the bunny hill for a while.
We're on a date, you know, want to spend time together.
Fine, all right, we'll go down the same slope again. Move it, kid. But I was also very broke at the time. So, like, everything, like, I got on my bank account and I was like, okay, I can afford her lesson. And I had I couldn't pay for my electric bill, but I could afford, like, the season pass. So, like, I didn't have to worry about that. I had a pass. And anyway, so we get up to the mountains. Point being, I know how much money was in my bank account because I was like, I got to buy lunch too. Mm-hmm. So we get up there. I get her in a lesson, and it ends at, like, right around lunchtime. And I'm like, sweet. And then they were like, hey, we're doing the special for $20. You can also get a lesson. And I was like, maybe now I can learn how to, like, jump and land. Because I'd been snowboarding a while. Never figured out. I figured out the jumping part. Never figured out how to land.
It is an important second part of the process.
Yeah, there's two parts. Turns out they're both equily important. You
don't have a pilot's license, do you?
No. They keep saying no. I go out, have a great time, and I'm down in the area where she's supposed to be, and the lesson's over, and I'm seeing people who were in her class, but I'm not seeing her. And I'm like, man, where'd she go? And I ask one of them, they're like, oh, I think she went to the medical area. And so I run over to the medical clinic on the mountain.
Did you run or snowboard?
I ran because it's flat.
Okay.
Well,
it'd be funnier if you did snowboard. I'm going to get there eventually. Can someone push me?
Little lift, guys? Anybody? No? All right. Yeah, so I got there, and she was there incapacitated with some kind of shoulder injury. I think they said she damaged her rotator cuff. And so she's on Vicodin now to manage the pain. And they're like, hey, no more snowboarding. And I'm going like, man, this is like, I feel really terrible. What do you want to do? Do you want to go home? Are you feeling okay? Do you want lunch? You know, because I was going to buy you lunch too. And she was like, I'm okay right now. It doesn't hurt that bad. Let's go get some lunch. So she goes up and she orders something, and I'm doing the math in my head. So, because I'm like, based on what she orders will affect what I order. Yeah. And
so this is broke.
Let me get a glass of water with one ice cube.
And anybody who turned in their tray with extra fries on it.
Yeah, I'll take all of that, please. And so, I'm like, okay, I can order this. And we eat our food, and the guy comes by, and he's like, all right, and here's the check. And I'm like, I got this. Yeah. Hand the card back, Garcon. And he takes it, runs off, and comes back, and he's like, hey man, you got a different card? And I went like, no, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, it declined, bro, sorry. And I was like, can you run it again? He's like, yeah, I already did. I was like, oh fuck, like, and then I'm looking at her, and she's like, I got it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll pay you back.
Hey, at least you didn't have to wash dishes.
Like, I know I have the money. I don't understand. And she's like, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Thankfully, she's whacked out on Vicodin.
Yeah, so. Thanks, drug companies. Anyway, we go down to my car, and I'm apologizing profusely for her having to pay and for her getting injured. And then I go to find my car keys, and I can't find my car keys.
That's Spencer patting himself down, by the way, looking for car keys.
Yeah. Nice visual for a podcast.
Thanks.
Yeah, no. I thought the sound would, make it very clear what I was doing. But fine.
I just want to point out, all you had was a rhythmic thumping.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your heart pounding because you're worried about how the date's going.
It was going badly at that point.
Very badly.
Because she didn't really like. We were friends, but we, like it's a strange experience when like the first physical, like real significant physical contact that's made is like them also searching through your shit to find the car keys. Like, where you have to have them.
That's what you're saying. Is
And
you
so
got some
then,
on the
we
first
kind of like look back on the mountain, and I'm like, well, there's somewhere up there. So we go back into the lodge, and I go do all the runs that I did, looking in hopes that I will find shiny metallic
Because that
things.
seemed like to have a high percentage of success.
It seemed better than sitting there and just apologizing a lot. And I was doing something, which felt better. And then I came back empty-handed, oddly enough.
Quick question, side note. Did you think to stop at the Lost and Found before you went and searched every run?
Yes, we did ask.
Okay.
And so they were like, no. But I came back and they were like, hey, somebody did say they found some like car keys were turned in. And I went like, they have to be mine. And they're like, but they didn't know where that person was. So there was another little wait where we were trying to figure it out. And I just like started running to the lifties. And I found at the other end of the whole thing, there was some guy who's like, yeah, I got some car keys. What are you driving? And I went, a Geo Metro, because that was true.
Mm-hmm.
And he went, yeah, here you go, man. Nobody else would say they could do that. And I was like, oh,
Nobody's going to lie to get a Geo
sweet
Metro.
freedom. So yeah, I ran back, told her the good news. We get in the car. We're on our way down, and I'm going like, I can't believe that happened. That's crazy. And just outside of Sandy, like 3 or 4 miles outside of Sandy, the car just dies and does not turn over. Like won't start, won't go. And there we were stuck on the side of the road. I called our boss at the time, who's a good friend of ours, and he went and borrowed a flatbed pickup truck from one of his friends, drove up to rescue us, but brought another friend with him. So Amber had to spend the entire time driving back to Vancouver, sitting on my lap while these two discussed inappropriate things.
About general inappropriate or about you?
No, generally inappropriate.
Okay.
I will add that she was on, when they finally came to rescue us, they found us, she was on her phone with her dad going like, yeah, they finally, like, oh my God, they're finally here. We're out of here. And like my friend opens the door because it's steamy and goes like, oh, it smells like sex in here. Great. Great.
Yeah.
The best part of this is I went home and she got dropped off, and my buddy came over and was like, dude, how was the date, man? Like, was it good? And I was like, there's so much that happened, I don't even want to talk about it. And he's like, oh, all right, like bad? And I was like, yeah, dude, it was a horrible date. Like, I mean, like,
and all on you.
Yeah, all on me. Like, there was just like, what else could go wrong? And I was like, I just want to watch TV, man. He was like, okay. I went and pressed the power button on the TV, and the power button fell out of the TV. And I went, I'm going to bed. That's it.
I'm done.
That is it.
So now my question is, because for those who don't know, Spencer is now married to this woman. And they have 2 kids.
Yeah.
Right. So what did you say to convince her to go on that second date? Did you hold the money that you owed her over her head as repayment, or
if you ever want that lunch money back?
I want to know what line you laid down to make her go, I'll give him one more chance.
Amber, if you're out there, let me know what I said.
It had to be good. It had to be a solid.
I mean, I'll take credit for it. Sure. Yeah. Nailed it.
So anyway, that is Spencer's first date with his now wife. So welcome to Medical Stuff. My name is Mark. I really want to know what you said to her, Frankum. That's Chris. I'm just playing with my knob Sphinxton over there. And this is Spencer. I don't know how I married Oliver over here. So
yeah. No, that's a good point. How are you married? It's an incredible first date. It's an amazing first date. But
like again. And it was all on you.
Yeah.
It's like it wasn't like y'all just didn't get along.
No.
It wasn't like there was a personality conflict. It was.
Which, by the way, if you want to be a guest on our show, you too can come here and get shit on by both of us. That make you relive terrible times in your life and then rub it in.
Spencer's spending time away from his family to get abused like this.
Well, hey, we're back for part 2.
We are. Medical myths and mysteries. So last podcast, we went over what makes a good study, how to maybe try and learn how to think and not what to think.
Yeah, and the importance of doing that.
Right.
And I think today we're going to cover some of the stuff that's out there.
Right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is homeopathy. So homeopathy is a belief system, I'm going to go with.
That's the best way to put it. Actually, really quick, I'm going to interject. I just want to point out, homeopathy is near and dear to my heart for one reason. It was kind of my introduction to being a skeptic, because this was kind of the first thing that I had seen that was so prevalent in stores and in treatments and in literature that, well, as you're about to find out, doesn't pan out.
No.
And so it was kind of my introduction to being more skeptical about the crap I read.
Right. So homeopathy is an alternative medical system that was developed in Germany at the end of the 18th century. I did not realize it went back that far.
Yeah.
So supporters of homeopathy point to 2 unconventional theories, one of them being that like cures like. And we'll go into a little bit of examples of those later. But this is the notion that disease can be cured by a substance that produces similar symptoms in healthy people. And they also go by the law of minimum dose, meaning that the lower the dose of the medication, the greater its effectiveness.
Yeah, and what they're talking about there is, like, let's say because mercury, for example, let's say mercury causes nausea and vomiting. Well, in a homeopathic medication, you could take mercury and give that to somebody, because then it would cure their nausea and vomiting, but you have to dilute it first. And the more you dilute it, the better. So what they'll do is they'll put the mercury in saline or just water. Actually, water is the most common thing. It's just, some water, and they keep diluting that down again and again and again. They actually
basically to the point that it's either non-existent.
Yeah.
Or
so you're not even drinking mercury.
No, it's not. The concept of like versus like cures like was suggested by Hippocrates, right?
Hippocrates.
I was joking, Chris.
Sorry. Hey, I don't know.
Watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, okay?
Did you know they're doing another one of those?
Are they really?
Yeah, same actors.
Nice.
Yeah.
So about 400 BC, when he prescribed a small amount of mandrake root to treat mania, knowing that it produces mania in much larger doses. So a large dose causes mania. So a small dose will cure it.
Obviously.
I want to know who thought of this. Like versus like treats like that had to be somebody saw that and they're like, oh, I guess we'd fix that by just making more things that cause that.
Right.
Well, and a lot of this kind of gained, if I'm correct here, a lot of this kind of gained momentum for the time being due to tuberculosis, believe it or not. So tuberculosis was very prevalent. It used to be very prevalent, and it was lethal. And early on, we didn't have very good treatments for tuberculosis, to the point that essentially doing nothing at all was better than some of the treatments that we were attempting as a society, particularly, or at least in European countries. And that helped actually homeopathy gain some speed, because there were homeopathic tuberculosis treatment centers where people were going, and they were essentially getting nothing because the solutions were so dilute. They were essentially just getting water. And that turned out to be better than some of the treatments that were being attempted in the 18th century. And that helped it gain a lot of speed.
So, then you fast forward to the 16th century, and you come across Paracelsus. And he wrote Similia Similibus Curantur. What does that mean, Spencer?
Sneeze.
What makes a man ill also cures him.
Does Spencer.
Why do we bring him on?
I don't know.
Stories about his goofy life.
Right, seriously.
There he goes.
We just wanted to berate him.
So now you have naturopathy, which is a broad spectrum description of which in which practitioners are more likely to prescribe multiple treatment approaches like supplements, herbs, and dietary adjustments, versus homeopathy, which is a single system of medicine in which practitioners focus totally on the application of homeopathic medicines. Now, we can talk about a homeopathic doctor versus a naturopathic doctor.
Can we?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Naturopaths actually go through medical school. They go through an accredited medical school. Now, stick with me and stop making faces.
Chris.
So a naturopathic doctor, an ND, does go and they have to have a bachelor's degree, and they will go to they'll go to a school that is accredited by the same accreditation organization that does accreditation for medical schools. The biggest difference is not the information that they learn, but the philosophy behind it. Now you have an MD, right? You can also have a doctor of osteopath, which is a DO.
Mm-hmm.
And they both study medicine.
Sure.
They both learn the same information, but they have different philosophies about how to treat the body. Generally, a doctor of osteopath looks at the whole body versus a specific illness inside the body. Naturopathic doctors go through a 4-year degree. They can prescribe in a lot of states. They can prescribe medications, and they have a board that they have to take. Boards have to pass, just like an MD. And it's just that they're more inclined towards alternative medicines in conjunction with prescription medicines or prescribed treatments.
I was under the impression that they went through far less clinical hours
They may.
as well.
They may. Well, okay, now you go to your general practitioner.
Yeah.
They go through the same number of clinical hours in school, but they don't have the residency afterwards.
Versus, like, say, a cardiologist.
Right, which may go to 4 or 5 years of residency once they get their MD.
Which is going to be additional clinical hours in their chosen field.
Right.
There is a naturopath who has since gone away from that field, and she writes Confessions of a Naturopath, and she talks about the schooling outline and how it compares to that of a medical doctor or a doctor of osteopath, or, like standard sort of things. And she does highlight, that's one of the things that she highlights, is the clinical hours and how they're approached, and, what they're required for a doctor
Right.
to graduate, and what they're required for a naturopath to graduate. And that's kind of one of the things that she says is like completely lacking there, or one of the things that she says was failing. And now she's a PhD candidate for, oh God, I can't remember. Something.
Okay. Wow, strong work.
Yeah.
She's a
Confessions of a Naturopath.
There you go. Okay, so, but there, as opposed to a homeopath doctor, which has far less schooling, this is generally would be, I guess, more of like a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Village medicine man. Is that too unfair?
Well, no, I was going to say when you go in and you study under somebody else.
Okay, gotcha.
Like an apprenticeship.
Apprenticeship, thank you.
Gotcha.
It'd be more like an apprenticeship under somebody else. So there's no real
Yeah.
regulation on what you're learning or...
They're basically learning which homeopathic remedies allegedly cure what.
whatever.
And
I'm going to be upfront with my bias. I don't buy any of this stuff.
Homeopathy?
No, what you guys are saying. It's clearly I'm the naysayer. There has to be a naysayer.
Oh, gotcha.
So the claims of homeopathic doctors, which are also called homeopaths, they weaken these ingredients by adding water or alcohol. They shake the mixture, which is called potentization. Good Lord.
Potentiation?
There we go. Yeah, sure, we'll go with that one. Potentization.
Okay.
Because it's not potentiation, it's potentization, because you're reducing the potency of whatever it is you're mixing.
But remember, in homeopathic land,
You want to do that.
Yeah, and because that'll increase its
Effectiveness. Also, they lower the dose, and that means the more powerful the medicine, what Chris was just talking about. But in fact, what ends up happening is the remedies no longer contain any molecules of the original substance. And then they can bring them out in various forms, like sugar pellets. I like to get the sugar pellet form of my medication constantly.
I would love that.
Liquid drops, creams, gels, tablets. That was an example of what we're talking about here, where like cures like. Red onion makes your eyes water. So that is obviously going to be something that cures your allergies, because allergies make your eyes water.
And that is... whenever I hear it, it almost sounds like you're making it up to be funny, but no, that's really that's really the
That is a legit
process.
example off of a homeopath.
Yeah, and if you go to there are some more prominent homeopath websites, and they often try and compare it to how, for example, like a vaccine works, where a lot of vaccines use a deactivated or dead example of what it's trying to vaccinate against into the body, and well, that's like cures like. That's a completely different process. What you're doing there is you're training the body's natural response to be ready when the actual bug comes in.
Right.
That's completely different.
Yeah, they
This is
make
not
it
that.
weaker or they make it dead so that you don't actually get sick from it.
Right. And so the stuff where they're taking red onion or they're taking mercury or they're taking any substance, I believe there's a duck liver that's famous where they used a single duck liver and they were able to divide it up and dilute it down so much and make so much medicine in it. It's called like the $1 million duck.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an example you can look up. But
Well,
yeah.
here's some common treatments for other ailments that they'll use. Poison ivy. Because you definitely want to ingest poison ivy.
Right. Well,
Well, I mean,
at least
remember, you're not ingesting any poison ivy.
at least you won't be.
Yeah.
White arsenic, which I don't know why we need to call it white arsenic. I think any arsenic is probably going to be bad for you. Crushed whole bees.
Crushed whole beans.
I don't know what we're trying to cure with this one. And an herb called arnica.
I have a buzzing in the ear. Get the bees. Get the bees.
No, the crushed whole ones.
Yeah. And then dilute them down.
So there have been many studies done on homeopathy. And the problem is with homeopathy and some of the other things we're going to talk about today. People are using this to replace
Medicine.
medicine.
legitimate medicine.
Yeah.
And there's just no positive studies where they will, like Chris was talking about with the vaccinations, they will try and attach themselves to legitimate medicine to justify what they're trying to sell you or what they're trying to tell you. Unfortunately, like I said, there's no studies to back this up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing to point out is that, a lot of the people are like, but they have an effect. Like I've seen them work, and in some cases, the inactive ingredient to they're like, oh, we've got this homeopathic sleep aid. It helps me go to sleep at night. I love it. I don't like the Ambiens. I don't like the Trazodones and, the other medications that people tend to take for their side effects. They're like, I really like this homeopathic sleep aid. And then you look at the inactive, the active ingredient, is whatever, crushed
whole
bees.
bees,
Yeah.
yeah.
Crushed whole bees.
Right.
Diluted down, 100,000 times. And then the other part is like alcohol.
Right. Yeah, they mix in alcohols, which will actually make you sleepy. So.
Yeah, and there are people who do they're like, I will overdose on this homeopathic sleep aid. I'll take all of this now because they're really just getting like a nice,
Get a good buzz going.
7 ounces of alcohol.
Yeah.
Take a shot.
Well, and you also have just the flat out placebo effect.
Yep.
Where when you take something and you believe it's going to work, it's going to help you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
last week we talked about different ways to rule out the placebo effect
Right.
in test. And that's where homeopathic remedies typically fall short in a test.
Right.
You have your control group, which is not receiving anything. And then you have the other group, which is receiving a homeopathic remedy. They're not able to really find any significant difference from the
Right.
control group.
Yeah. It's important to include the sham study.
Yeah. With the sham study?
Yeah. Have you heard of this? They'll do now.
Is this the ShamWow guy?
No, man, I missed that guy.
He's in jail or went to jail. I don't know if he's still in jail. Drug charges. I
the
think.
guy who I really miss, OxyClean.
Oh, Billy Mays.
Yeah, Billy
Yeah.
Mays.
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah.
Or in jail. I don't know.
No, he died in a plane crash, I believe.
No, he had a MI.
He had a heart attack.
He had a
Yeah,
heart attack.
After the plane crash.
Cocaine-induced heart attack.
You don't know that?
Okay, we don't know if it was cocaine.
Well,
induced.
yeah, I'm just saying that he died from a heart attack, and then also that he had cocaine inside him.
Okay.
Those things are facts.
So the sham.
Yeah, so they'll actually do like for surgeries and stuff. They'll do sham surgeries. So they'll go in. They'll actually put people to they'll put people out. They'll do procedures. They'll pretend to do procedures. So they'll actually make a cut. They'll do stitches and the whole thing. The person will come out from under anesthesia, and they will think that a surgery was done on them that was not actually done on them. And like they'll measure outcomes based on that. Like, oh, hey, this person is reporting that they've got relief because they thought that they had this surgery done.
So was this a legitimate?
This was a legitimate study. They do this with acupuncture as well, where they do sham acupuncture. It turns out people, if it looks like their hand, they will think that a needle has gone through. They'll report, as long as they visualize a needle going in them, they will report that acupuncture was done.
How do they? So if they think it was their hand,
it's the power of perception.
Is it their hand?
It is not their hand.
So then whose hand is it?
I believe they use mannequin hands, and people they'll see the needle and they'll go, ouch.
I've seen something about this.
Yeah.
There was a TV show on
So it's
science.
There's like a box or an apparatus, though.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, what they were in the show was called Brain Games.
Yeah.
Great show if you get a chance to watch it. It's a really cool
right.
show. But they had people set up where they were touching their hand, then they kind of switched it out to a mannequin hand, and people still felt, but they couldn't really see whether it was their hand or not.
Yeah.
And they continued to feel the motion.
Person touching.
And then they took an axe out and chopped the hand, and people flipped out.
Yeah.
Because they thought they were trying, and they were like, I actually felt pain when you hit me.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, well, we didn't hit you, though.
Yeah.
So
It's the power of perception.
That's
I wonder how
amazing.
you get funding for that study. So we're going to do fake surgeries on people and then tell them afterwards that it was nothing.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba.
Yeah.
There's like a candid camera on the corner.
How do you tell the person that you didn't do anything at that point, and how do you not get sued?
Yeah.
Hey, this is going to be awkward.
So
Well, I'm
Remember that shoulder surgery we did?
quote unquote.
Yeah, it's going to be more of a didn't.
But so homeopathy, again, I mean, it's near and dear to my heart. And it's one of those things that this is where how to think can really come in. And you got to use some critical thinking skills. So homeopathy, time and time again, has been shot down by various studies. Yet homeopaths really tend to cling on to different explanations for that. For example, homeopathy affects everyone differently. So people may need a different dose, or they may need something different that the study didn't capture, or there's some reason that they tend to cling on to as to why these studies typically fail a placebo-controlled test. And here's one of the things you have to sort of think about. If you can't prove that the mechanisms behind homeopathy work, then you have to wonder, how did someone discover this in the first place? If you can't design an experiment to show that it exists, how did somebody come up with this? So if someone came to your house and said, hey man, there's gold underneath your house. All you got to do is buy a shovel from me. You can dig down and get the gold. You say, shit, yeah. You buy that shovel, you start digging underneath your own house. No gold. You go back to the guy, guys, you just got to keep digging. Just keep digging. Dig in a different spot around your house. Keep digging, no gold. You pay scientists. They do soil samples. They do core samples. They come back. They say, hey, man, there's no gold. Sooner or later, you got to start wondering, why the fuck did that guy think there was gold under my house in the first place? Easy. To sell you the damn shovel. That's my thoughts on homeopathy.
Nailed it.
So, aside from Chris's mindless rantings over there,
Hashtag science shovel.
something a little more legitimate. So in 2010, the UK House of Commons Science and Technology Committee, the STC.
The STC.
Yeah,
of course.
They released a report.
Are you down with STC?
Yeah, you know me.
So in this report, they released, they concluded that homeopathy is a failed science. And I like this quote coming up at the end, and should be completely abandoned. No further support in the National Health System, the medical branch of the British government that takes, runs everything medical.
Yep.
No further support in the NHS or further research should be done, following that the British Medical Association has openly called, and I like this, for the NHS to ban on homeopathy, calling the practice witchcraft.
Yeah.
Harsh.
Yeah. And then you follow that up in 2015 for a comprehensive study in Australia, where they conclude that no health conditions for which there is reliable evidence that homeopathy is effective. And so you have two national-based organizations that have studied this. And if I remember correctly reading from the article, they reviewed like 2,200 different studies for the Australian report.
Damn.
And then you get things in 2016, the FDA has issued a warning against using homeopathic teething tablets and gels because of possible health risks to infants and children. So you're actually doing harm. So, I mean, I am a believer in, hey man, don't touch the brown acid because it's not particularly good, but hey man, it's your trip.
Sure.
If you feel you're getting benefit from something, I'm not going to believe in it, but that's your trip until it starts hurting people.
Yeah. And that's where like you've already mentioned, but that's where these things are a problem for me. And I can tell you, as a paramedic, I have now run several calls where someone has taken an unproven remedy in place of their prescribed medications and are worse off for it. Recently, twice, children with asthma. Using we'll talk about them in a little bit here, but using an essential oil instead of their inhaler.
Right.
And the problem with breathing problems is that once they start going south, they go south quickly because the proper medications become harder and harder to deliver as their airways start clamping down. And unfortunately, in 2 cases now, I've had children who were given something that is not prescribed and is not proven to relieve asthma instead of their asthma medications that made the call a whole lot harder. They're both fine, but it's a call that didn't need to happen.
Right.
And so then I've had one patient, this is a while ago, that was treated with a relative of his had suggested that he'd come off of his cardiac meds and start taking homeopathic remedies. And that relative was actually on scene. And this gentleman is dead from it. He had heart problems and came off all his heart meds, started taking just homeopathic remedies instead, and ended up started having some heartburn one day, wanted to go to his doctor. This relative told him he shouldn't go to his doctor because his doctor is going to put him back on all those. This is a quote, caustic medication, which, by the way, caustic has something to do with pH level, which has nothing to do with this guy's medications. But anyway, and what he's actually having, that heartburn, was actually him having a heart attack.
Right.
And had he gone to his doctor, he wouldn't be dead. But he's dead.
Right.
This is why this stuff gets to me so much.
And we talked about it in the first episode about being a skeptic.
Yeah.
It's okay to have a healthy sense of skepticism.
Absolutely.
But you have to apply that across the board.
Right.
I'm skeptic. I'm being skeptical of the medications doctor's giving me.
Yeah.
Then you need to be equally skeptical of what your family member's telling you.
And that's a good point. That's a good thing to say, because if you require the medications that you take to have good studies and evidence behind them before you'll even touch them, how come you don't have the same requirement of a homeopathic remedy or of an essential oil? Why is it that the only thing you need to hear is from your good friend, who, by the way, is trying to sell you these things in a multi-level marketing setup, and then it's good for you?
Right.
Why is that?
Because whether this is an inherent human thing or a societal thing at this point in time, have an inherent distrust of our government. And I'm not saying that that's not unwarranted. I'm just saying that to say that medications that are being prescribed to you by a pharmaceutical company that have been approved by the government are all part of a big conspiracy. The problem I have when we get into that argument is Bill Clinton couldn't get a Hummer in the Oval Office. There were only 2 people there, and that still got out. Well, so you're expecting tens of thousands of people to be in on this conspiracy and somebody not talk about it?
Well, and this is something that I actually love to say, is that if you believe in a global conspiracy to promote vaccines, even though they're deadly for you, then it would actually make more sense that you believe that we're visited by space invaders, because it would take fewer people to keep that secret.
I think you hit on a point about sort of how humans work, and that is we like to think that we are based on logic. Like I like to think that I have this rational idea behind the way that...
I literally thought you were going to say rash.
Rash, yeah.
I like to think I have this rash.
I got this rash. I guess I should tell Amber about it. It's been long enough.
I think you've done enough to Amber just on the first
Of
date.
course, the worst part is you say, Amber, I got a rash. She's like, yeah, I've been meaning to tell you something.
Amber would not. That's mean.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if someone's car broke down and I had to catch dinner with my injured shoulder, I don't know. I might try to escape that.
Anyway.
We're never getting
Wow.
another
All
guest
right.
again.
No.
This is the last guest we'll ever have.
Well, she's not going to let us come up. She's not going to let him come up and play with us anymore.
No,
so.
that's true.
So we like to think that we are rational people, that we build our beliefs based on the evidence. But really what we do is we have our beliefs and then we look for things that sort of support them. And so I'm more inclined to believe the narrative of a friend who I trust, because we're just sort of emotional people. We base our beliefs often on emotion.
Also on intuition.
And on intuition. And so, like when a friend that you trust, that you like, that you respect, tells you that they have, this medicine that's been working that would work better.
Out of crushed whole bees.
Yeah, crushed whole bees. And, they explain how it works, and but you don't get it. But hey, like your friend is telling you this, you want to believe them. And so you're more likely to do that.
You're less likely to be deceived by the friend that you know than by the government you don't know.
And that's the thought. And the other thing too is I think a lot of it too is I don't believe that people who are selling homeopathic remedies, some of them I believe know exactly what they're doing, but I think a lot of people just don't.
No.
Yeah.
They honestly don't. And
No, you can't have that many people trying to deceive everybody else. They
Right.
truly believe what they're telling you.
yeah, it's just you have to consider the source.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things to where we're more able to reject a cold piece of paper that has study results on it than we are the face of our good friend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. The power of a good narrative.
So just wrapping up on homeopathy here, multiple studies done by multiple governments have found that there's no definable value.
Hashtag shovels.
There you go. If you'd like to learn more about this, we will have links on the show notes
Cool.
for you to go see. So next we're going to talk about essential oils.
This is an interesting one for me. Being in the medical field, I will say this is one of those new remedies that has come about that.
They've been around since 3000 to 2500 BC.
Well, it's hip now,
Okay.
and it's even it's permeating the medical professionals that I work with as well. Are getting behind this and kind of selling it. By kind of selling, I mean they're definitely selling it. Yeah, I guess I'll let you go over the history there, since you seem to be the history buff.
Well, I'm the one reading the outline apparently. So,
Well, I mean you're trying.
so it's commonly thought that the Egyptians are given credit as the first culture to use aromatic extracts for beauty and care. Culinary uses, spiritual and physical well-being.
Culinary.
Culinary.
Culinary. Is that how the
It's like a Canadian thing.
sort of left-handed way to pronounce that?
I hate both of you.
It's cool. I can say that. Both my parents are left-handed.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Was your best friend in high school left-handed as well?
No, probably not. Because
Anyway.
you can't trust the shifty
Back
left-handed
to what
people.
we're doing.
He's probably right. I want to point that out. He's actually probably right. It's probably just that most of us are just dumbasses. Like how everyone says Valentine's Day all the time, but it's Valentine's Day all the time.
Or old-timers disease.
Oh,
Yeah, old time
I had
disease.
a 5-minute conversation with a trainee last month on the proper pronunciation of that, and it took 5 minutes for him to finally get it. It wasn't last month. It was a couple months ago.
Oh, jeez. God, wasn't even putting in his
you can't
medical.
be specific like that, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't even putting in his Alzheimer's or in his medical history. Patient has old timers disease. Some doctor.
Or was it Alzheimer's?
It was Alzheimer's.
Yeah, it's Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Which, given though,
Now, I will accept old timers disease.
yeah,
Perfectly acceptable.
yeah, and it makes sense given the population that typically has Alzheimer's disease.
So, depending on who you are citing historical evidence, you can also find references to uses of essential oils in India much earlier. But they really came back and started coming back into popularity in 1910 with René Maurice Gattefois, a French cosmetic chemist who severely burned his hands and arms in an accidental lab explosion.
I'm going to trust your pronunciation on that, given that you're Canadian.
Right. Well, it's French-Canadian, so, and I was born in Quebec, so I am obviously the resident expert on these things.
Dude, for sure.
Oh, yeah, totally
Culinary.
shows. Do you speak French?
Culinary. I know you're full of merit, so...
I'm guessing merit is shit.
He extinguished the flames, but he described it as both my hands were covered with rapidly developing gas gangrene. He submerged his burns in a large container of lavender oil. Now, I want to take a side note here on this. If you get a burn, one of the worst things you can do is cover it in oil.
Sounds like a terrible thing to do.
Well, a very common home remedy for burns.
Butter.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually went on a call. A lady dumped hot oil on her lower face, chest, carrying a pot.
Ooh.
I get there. The fire department is opening bag of saline after bag of saline to rinse off her skin. I go, do we want to go to the ambulance? Or I have more bags of saline. And the firefighter turns and looks at me and goes, we think we should probably wash off the egg first.
Egg?
I look at him and go, did they run out of butter? She literally had the raw egg, dumped all over her on a burn.
Oh, Jesus. So that's open skin.
Right.
That's now moist because you have raw egg. And egg is food.
Well,
Ergo...
have you ever looked at, do you know why we cook eggs? Because there are plenty of organisms inside of the egg that will cause infection if left on an open wound.
This is bacteria party.
Right. So, yes, don't replicate this.
Unless you're corn on the cob, then slather yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And call 911. We'll be there.
Burns in a large container of lavender oil, reporting that just one rinse with lavender essence stopped the gasification of the tissue.
Oh, so it's not, if you just burn yourself significantly, you just jump into a vat of lavender oil.
Right.
Now, this treatment was followed by profuse sweating and healing, which began the next day.
Right. So,
Well, I believe it. I'm sold.
Followed it up with Jean Valinet. Or Valinet. Oh.
Side note, real quick, is anybody else envisioning the first Batman where dude fell into the vat
Oh,
of
yeah.
green?
Jack Nicholson?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. The entire time.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
He's a Parisian medical doctor and army surgeon who was also a colleague of Gattefois. He began to use essential oils with great success as antiseptics treating war wounds during the Indochina War from 1948 to 1959. He was in China treating war wounded when he ran out of a supply of antibiotics. Out of desperation, he began to use essential oils on the injured. He was amazed to see how well the essential oils fought infection, creating many lives saved due to the use of essential oils. Now, I'm not saying this didn't happen. I wasn't there. And I could see how, if you had a proper preparation of essential oils, that yes, there are probably ones that have
Antimicrobial effects and whatnot.
Right.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no truth to the essential oil thing. I think that the truths that are there have been overinflated in the current love.
For every person who is, I'd say, mild-mannered and sort of explains the limitations of the product that they're selling in the purposes that it's intended for, there are plenty who are willing to tell you that this will stop any and all diseases.
Right. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not that, this could be helpful. It's that this is the cure-all. The snake oil says.
Right.
And you should forego antibiotic treatments.
Right.
Because
this is ancient stuff. The Egyptians use this. And there's a conception that because it's ancient means it's better. Like we have forgotten knowledge.
Called an appeal to antiquity. That's what that's called.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. By the way, do we have whole crushed bee oil?
No, but
I think you should Google that real quick.
I
to see if
think
we
we
can buy some.
should now.
Yeah.
So if not, just let everyone know
in
you can buy
1980, a French medical doctor, we seem to be really stuck in France on this, Daniel Penuel, along with French biochemist, I can nail Penuel, but biochemist I'm going to stumble over, Pierre Franchon.
It's not like you were about to say biocommunist, actually.
Yeah,
is what I was about to hear.
Investigated, they're French, so they're biosocialists, thank you.
That's weird.
I was going to say medical stuff. You get medical information and politics.
None of our information is that trustworthy. So they investigated and cataloged the medical properties of over 270 oils. The book, published in French in 1990, La Aromathérapie Exactement, quickly became a primary reference source for secondary authors researching and writing the medical benefits of essential oils. Now, earlier we talked about double-blind studies and having multiple people study what you're trying to prove, your hypothesis, to show that it is repeatable. When you have one source that everybody is referencing to then spread out or to write multiple books from, you've actually gone the opposite way from that.
Right.
Because we have no definitive proof that the original source is solid.
Right. And this
But now because you can say there's 15 books that all say this, it gives the appearance that this is legitimate information.
And really, it's just people cut and pasting, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Bad or terribly researched information. So one of the other things that I would like to point out, though, is when it comes to essential oils, and this is something that I've been particularly invested in lately, I have yet to see a placebo-controlled double-blind study about essential oils. I have actually seen a ton of literature and a ton of different studies and experiments regarding essential oils, some of them purporting good outcomes, but they all fail what I would call my hallmarks for a good study, and that would be placebo control, double blind, low p-value.
Right.
There's no placebo being the biggest part, no control group being the biggest part. A lot of the benefits that are purported can be attributed to the same benefits that we find in studies where they study the impact of stress on an individual. Okay. And what we see there is we see things that basically a pleasant smell or pleasant aroma can help people relax. That's not a terribly surprising concept or new. And then what we see from there is we see better rest. We see lower heart rates. We see lower blood pressure. What I have yet to see is anybody say, okay, this scent is an essential oil. This scent is not an essential oil. It's a placebo. It's some other scent. And to be able to test the differences between those two groups to see if it has anything to do with an essential oil, or are we just seeing what we already know exists, and that is that people who are relaxed have lower heart rates and lower blood pressures. What I would ask is that, so when you see a study that says, hey, when people smell lavender, they have lower heart rate, blah, 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 when it's a lavender essential oil, what I would say, would it surprise you to know that if there was a smelly or noxious odor in the room, you would see the opposite effect? That surprised 0 people. You can have
in our sample size of 3.
Yeah, in our sample size of
Speaking of noxious and smelly therapy, scents in the room.
Exactly, but that wouldn't surprise a whole ton of people. And so, I don't see a lot of evidence for essential oils. And what bothers me is recently there was an article where there's an ambulance service.
Yeah. Tri-State Ambulance.
Yeah.
What they wanted to do is they wanted to switch out. The doctor was concerned about the number of narcotics that they were administering to patients, which is a fair concern. Especially in this day and age when we've kind of gone like, oh man, a lot of people are ending up with addictions to opioids or opiates, depending. I listened to that podcast.
Yeah,
I follow you. And so the doctor for this ambulance company was trying to figure out alternatives, and they settled on trying essential oils. Now, to some effect, I'm sure that like you said, it probably smells nice. There's probably is something to the effect that it has on people. But is it better than just an ambulance that smells nice? There's no real good data that shows that it has that particular essential oil that they are going to use outperforms just based on the blind placebo control study You know, one of the other things that happens, and this happens frequently in medicine, is something seems like it will work just on the basis they look at the, you know, chemical structure and the impact that it should have based on just the, you know, chemical structure that it has. And they say, well, this should work based on, you know, the things that we know. And then it turns out that it doesn't. This happens all the time in medicine. And there are a lot of they're called in vitro studies that show that these chemical compounds, because they are chemicals, they are, you know, like they are pharmacological in some sense. They just don't pan out, even though it seems like based on these really simple scientific sort of looks into it that they should. So, I mean, that's something that happens in medicine all the time.
Well, back when I started, sodium bicarbonate.
Yeah.
That was a first-line drug in cardiac arrests because the working theory was your body becomes acidotic when your heart's not pumping. So we were giving sodium bicarb every 3 minutes, just like epi.
Yeah.
And as more information came along, they found that that was actually horribly bad. You're going too far the other direction. Another example would be MAST pants.
Yeah.
MAST stands for Military Anti-Shock Trousers, and they were originally used in the military.
Go figure.
I know. They were used for fighter pilots.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming they're still used because in that instance, they were very effective.
Yeah, the fighter pilot suits actually do have bladders that inflate to push blood back up to the head so they don't pass out when pulling G's.
Right. So if they go into a high-speed bank, they can actually force the blood away from their brain.
No, Spencer's got something to say. Come on.
No. Pulling G's. Is that what you learned how to say it in firefighters? Or not firefighters.
You got
school.
this, Spence. Come on.
Yeah, come on, man.
Fighter pilot school.
Fighter pilot school. Yeah, with the Top Gun.
Yeah.
So as you make a turn in a jet plane at high speeds,
You could be my.
it can actually push the blood away from your brain, causing you to pass out. So they have these bladders built into the suit that constrict the lower extremities. That way, more blood is being pumped to your brain. They tried to translate that to civilian use on ambulances in emergency situations for when the patient has low blood volume due to traumatic injuries.
Yeah.
And when they finally did a study on it, they actually found that not only was it not doing what they thought it would, which was push the blood back into the central system, giving you more blood to use, it was actually causing a huge detriment to the patients to the point that they stopped the study short because it was so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think that's one of the critiques I have of EMS in general is we take something, or, you know, our system takes something that seems like it would be a good idea, and then, you know, we kind of trial it out, you know, or we're trying to, you know, undo some of the damage, like, because, like, well, this is what, you know, we think should work.
Right.
You know, like backboards, for instance. You know, it makes sense in some way. We're like, well, we'd splint you know, like if your arm were broke, we'd splint it. So if your back might be broke, we should put people on really hard boards and, you know, and transport them to the hospital so they can see. And it turns out that, you know, that doesn't work all that well. It actually causes more harm most of the time.
I mean, it's not so much that it isn't doing what we desired it to do. They are splinted in place, but the problem is that the secondary effects from being laying on a hard board for initially, I mean, years ago, hours.
Yeah.
You know, and
now
it was
it's one of the first things you do in the ER is get them off.
Get them off the board.
Because, you know, what ends up happening is you get very severe pressure points very quickly.
And actually, we go into this in our EMS equipment episode.
Yes.
One of our first episodes, actually.
Which will not sound near as good as this episode.
No, it won't.
Because I'm not on it. Hashtag science.
Hashtag Spencer Tiger.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, now there was a very large corporation that is well known in the essential oil industry, and they have on their website they have a list of things what to say and not say. And I found this kind of interesting because I think that the list of things to say and not say, I always found to be a little contrary to what I was hearing from people who were using these products.
Right.
Do say things like, Do refer to temporary emotions. This will lift your mood. It will reduce your irritability, what Chris was talking about a few minutes ago. Do say you do not or do use cosmetic claims. It cleanses. It improves appearance. These are really kind of vague statements.
They're junk terms.
Yeah. Use words such as health, wellness, supports, and maintains. You refer to general body parts and systems for heart health or supports the respiratory system. You know, it goes on and on and on. But then there's a bunch of don't claims. Don't use disease claims. So the official statement from the company is you cannot claim that this will cure disease.
Yeah.
You know, don't use words such as disease, illness, cure, treat, repair, chronic. You know, don't refer to any disease or illness such as cancer, diabetes, autism, cold or flu. You know, don't recommend a product to augment or a therapy or drug. So on their own website, it says this isn't supposed to replace or enhance anything else you're taking.
Right. And this is kind of one of the things, this is another thing that when we're talking about how to think, most of your medications or treatments, think about Tylenol, Advil, Pepto-Bismol. How do you go and get those, Mark? You go buy them at the store.
Oh, buy them, yes.
Yeah, you just go.
Sure, I buy them.
You buy them over the counter, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. You steal them, you put them in your pockets, you walk out the door and hope the sensors don't work. Okay? That's one way of obtaining them.
Potato. Culinary.
But yeah, so it needs to raise a little bit of alarm when there's a company that essentially refuses that. In other words, you don't see these. Now, you can find essential oils on the shelf, but the major company that we're referencing here does not sell them on the shelf.
No.
And the main reason being is that it's a lot easier to sell when it's from your trusted friend. So they use a multi-level marketing deal. It's essentially and I might get flack for this, but it boils down to it's pretty much a pyramid scheme. This is the new age of...
Pyramid schemes are illegal.
Exactly. And so they had to change it. So now it's a multi-level marketing scheme. Right. And basically what it is you have typically your friends, and we all have that Facebook friend, that purchases stock, that purchases some essential oils from a company. And that is how that company is getting their money. That person then takes those essential oils and sells them to you. So your friend is now personally invested in the sale of these essential oils. Now, a company will move less volume this way in theory, but in the end, they will move more volume because the company, one, avoids liability because the company is no longer saying these things. Your friend is. And even though they have official statements on the website,
they can't control what you say to your friends.
Absolutely. And
a lot of times when your friends are talking to you, they'll give you very strong anecdotal evidence.
Right. And here's one of the things you have to be careful of. So there's a lot of research out there. A lot of people have been worried about, can I get in trouble for recommending an essential oil or really any of these remedies to my friends for something? And the term that comes up is unauthorized practice of medicine. Okay. As long as you avoid diagnosing somebody, you can generally avoid getting in trouble. So in other words, if I say, hey, Spence, I think you have asthma, you should take this essential oil. That's a problem. But you can give advice. So if Spence says, hey, I have asthma, and I say, hey, I have an essential oil that works for me, you should try it. That's not unauthorized practice. Right. There's no charge that comes with that. However, it doesn't necessarily protect you from all forms of civil suit. So let's say Spencer takes your advice and he takes it. You may not get hit with unauthorized practice, but Spencer may have a case to sue you for his medical bills.
Well, let's back up to the gentleman who died.
Yes. Okay.
Could that person be charged criminally with negligent homicide?
It depends on what the person said. If the person didn't diagnose him, then there's less of a case for that. Because specifically, unauthorized practice revolves around diagnosing someone when you're not authorized to do so.
Okay.
And it can also because
you're giving advice, not professional
Exactly. You're not telling someone what their disease is. You're giving them advice.
Right.
And that's technically not covered. However, that doesn't block you from a civil suit.
Right.
Someone could just as easily sue you for that as well. And so what we're now seeing on the website you were talking about is ways to now avoid civil suits. So as long as you are general and you don't make specific claims, it's harder to be sued.
So they even have a section on here, and this is where I kind of start having a problem with this. Disease claim.
Right.
So it fights a cold or flu. Don't say that.
Yeah.
Do say supports the immune system. And this is where it starts getting a little murky for me, where you're saying,
Right.
okay, well, now you're telling them how to avoid making the claim with still making the claim, giving the representation of the claim.
Yeah.
You know, helps fight obesity, helps with your weight loss plan, you know, helps with ADD, ADHD, right? Helps with focus and staying on task. You know, this is kind of to me, this is getting into a lot more murky area of making your claims.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
you know what my biggest fear about essential oil is?
That they're right.
Well, is that someday they prove that there is an essential oil that works and works well.
Right.
And here's why it bothers me. It doesn't bother me that there's now a new medication out there. I'm all for anything we find that can make us healthier.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. What bothers me is that this would then justify and embolden everything else. And because this is going the wrong way. Now, the company that you'd mentioned that has that website that you've been reading off of, they have said in the past that, hey, we're going to be focusing a lot of our funding and efforts on research going forward. Yeah. That's a problem, because now what you're telling me is you've sold first, research later. And this goes back to the whole thing as if you have that same skepticism about a pharmaceutical company, how come you don't have the same problem with this other company?
Right.
That is trying to sell you something and then worrying about the research later.
Apply your skepticism evenly.
Yeah.
Well, and if they're going to start doing their own studies after the fact of selling it to you, then the p-value needs to be looked at very closely on those studies.
Right.
And the institutional bias that's going to come along with that is going to be very suspect in my mind.
Sure. I mean, I guess the other one of the other things that I'd say, though, is if you try and apply the law of charitability to, you know, people and things. So if they go like, okay, we had these studies and we were selling them off and, you know, they were bad studies or they weren't really high quality studies. Yeah, but we wanted to move a market, you know, move a product. And people go like, yeah, these actually are really bad studies. Like, you guys should try and make, actually put out like better studies. Then it's also fair for them to go like, hey, you know what? We are going to do that. In the meantime, don't say these things.
That's true.
Because we can't claim that they do any of that. And that's a fair, it's a fair thing to do. And, you know, like you said, you know, like, make better studies, use double-blind placebo, just like drug companies have to go through. You have a long process. There's a long process that has to be done that shows that they're actually effective, you know, to the standards of medications. And in our the first episode, we talked about how, you know, sometimes that's kind of it seems to be a fairly low bar. You know, come meet that, then be medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and then another thing that the studies will do for you, properly done studies, is make sure that whatever you're studying is doing what you think it's going to.
Yeah.
Example of that would be Viagra.
Yeah.
What was Viagra originally developed for?
Blood pressure.
Right. Bring blood pressure down.
Yeah.
It does.
That does.
But it also has a side effect.
Yeah.
That was much more profitable than blood pressure medication. Another one is Rogaine.
How?
Oh, gosh. We talked about this in a past episode. What was Rogaine's initial use? Sleep? No.
No, I think it was antihypertensive also. No.
Yeah.
I'd have to look that back up. I can't remember right now. But it was found that when used, it increased hair growth. And guess what it's being sold for now? Now, these are two legitimate, studied properly studied and reviewed medications that are being used accurately.
Sure.
So talking about studies, there have been some studies, and we'll put a link to these studies that are put out by the NIH, National Institute of Health.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to just take a couple looks at a couple of these. The first one was reviewing the effects of essential oils mouthwash versus chlorhexidine mouthwash with respect to plaque and parameters of gingival inflammation.
Those seem like important things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they went on to PubMed, Medline, or Cochrane Central databases to search for studies up to and including September 2010 to identify appropriate articles. So they went back and they did post-review of studies that had already been done.
Okay. Sort of like a meta-analysis of studies. Okay.
So comprehensive search was designed and articles were independently screened for eligibility by 2 reviewers. So that not just one person looking at it, so that cuts down on your bias ability.
That's a lot of work for 2 people.
Yeah, it is. Well, it was only 390 unique articles. I'm sure that was some fantastic reading.
Which I'd like to point out, according to your source material here, Mark, only 19 of those 390 articles met the eligibility criteria.
Right. Which
goes to show you how many articles are out there that...
on a respected site.
Yeah.
That we talked about earlier, that it is a fine site, but they do not review the information. They just make sure that it's presented in a proper format.
Now, given these 390 articles could have been culled for other reasons, in other words, just not pertinent to this study, as opposed to done poorly. So I want to put that out there.
So,
look at you always being charitable.
I try.
So these studies showed that the chlorhexidine mouthwash provided significantly better effects regarding plaque control than the essential oil mouthwash. And I'm trying to remember what the essential oil mouthwash is, but it sounds horrendous.
Ugh.
I remember when I heard it, it was literally like gargling oil, like cooking oil.
Oh,
or
nice.
Something along those lines. So, take a look at that. I heard of I know somebody who did it and they were describing it, and I just felt it sounded horrendous. I figured that your plaque and gingival inflammation went down just because you weren't eating anything because you were nauseous constantly. So there's no significant reduction of the gingival inflammation found between the 2. So out of all these reviews, regardless of the claims, they found that the chlorhexidine mouthwash was better, much more reliable. Okay, and the standardized formula of essential oil mouthwash appeared to be reliable alternative to chlorhexidine mouthwash with respect to parameters of gingival inflammation. So, yes, it was as good as chlorhexidine for gingival inflammation, but it was not near as good for plaque control.
The other thing... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but you won't hear that part. What you'll hear is, well, they did this study and they found it to be as good.
Right. And that's why reading a study is important instead of just reading the headline. Last episode, we talked a little bit about a study called the ALPS study, which was amiodarone lidocaine placebo study that we did in our field. Amiodarone and lidocaine are 2 medications we give during for many reasons, but during a cardiac arrest, we give them for certain non-pulse producing rhythms. And we were trying to find out if one was better than the other. And the study came out and actually said that not only is one not better than the other, the immediate conclusion was that neither was much better than placebo in terms of hospital discharge.
Right.
In other words, people who had essentially died, and we started CPR and we gave them these medications, had no higher incidence of being discharged from the hospital than those who received a placebo. And immediately, I would say some of the more vocal and perhaps more youthful paramedics were immediately like, oh, given that there's no reason to give these drugs anymore. There's no reason to give them. But what the study does point out, and I do have it pulled up here, but it does point out that in its conclusion that overall, yes. But if you look at a subset, the witnessed arrest, in other words, where people were visibly seen by a bystander to go down and die, essentially, those people had a significantly improved discharge rate when given amiodarone or lidocaine than those in the placebo group.
Still, they were equal in effectiveness.
Yes, the amiodarone and lidocaine were equal in effectiveness, but they were better than placebo in that group. However, because the study was not specifically designed for that group, They did not draw a conclusion there. They did note that needs more study.
Right.
So the correct thing to do then is keep giving them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've done. But there's a lot of paramedics. In fact, there's a lot of synopsises.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah. On many other articles, there's many articles about the study out there that completely omit that very important part of the study, and it's led a lot of paramedics. In fact, the only place that I've actually been able to find that portion is the actual study itself.
Right. Well, again, saying that is a bigger splash than explaining the whole concept.
Absolutely. And there's one of my favorite things ever was something said by John Oliver, not Spencer Oliver, John Oliver. He's a comedian. He has a show, and he talks about...
Two things I don't have.
Comedy.
Show.
Yeah. Well, you kind of do now. You're a guest on our show.
Does that count?
No.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Yeah. But he has a really good point. And that he says is that there is pressure for studies to make a good headline because it's really hard to get funding. And I forget the exact sample he gives, but something says like a study that has title, "Nothing's Up with Gluten," doesn't get a lot of headlines, and the funding don't come with those kind of headlines. So that's why it's so important to have these bias blocking techniques in your studies, is because those are the kind of things that can create a bias.
Fun fact, they should have used tea tree oil and peppermint.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what they use for the mouthwash. Well, to be fair, the internet has many essential oils that used for mouthwash, but tea tree is a very common one, and peppermint.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Peppermint.
Interesting.
Yeah, for that fresh, clean feeling.
So the second one I'm going to go with is a second study that we're going to take a look at in the last one. Were observational studies that suggest that diets high in omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fat acids may protect people from cognitive decline and dementia. Now, I remember seeing this when it came out. That it became kind of a news story, that, well, if you start taking fish oil, then you won't get dementia and Alzheimer's.
It was on NPR.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Were they for or against it? Or were they just reporting
They were just reporting the story, but they were very positive about it.
Really? So they actually did a study on this. They pulled studies on this from the Ottawa, the Cochrane Dementia and Cognitive Improvement Group Specialized Register. Searching for the terms omega-3, PUFA, which is polyunsaturated fatty acids, fatty acid, fish, linseed, I'm not going to pronounce that one or that one. Two other types of oils that are fish-based.
Wow, those are big words.
Yeah, they are.
I'm going to go with crushed whole fish.
Now, when we talk about this, we're not talking about fish sauce you get with your dinner.
No.
Which is delicious at the Chinese restaurants or the Asian restaurants. So the reviewers sought and extracted data from instant dementia, cognitive function, and safety and adherence, either from published reports or by contacting the investigators from the original data. So regardless of what the original study said, once they went back and reviewed these studies and they really got down to the nuts and bolts of it, they did not show any sort of effect on dementia.
Yeah.
This involved 3,221 participants. That was no different between the omega-3 and the placebo group in a mini mental state examination score at final follow-up.
Yeah.
And they were following 24 or 40 months of intervention. So this was a significant amount of time of taking this medication or taking this oil that should have had an effect by that point.
Yeah.
So the same thing we've been talking about for this whole time.
Yeah.
Make sure you're using trusted sources. Make sure the people or the sources that you're using are accurately representing what you think they are. And be skeptical about everything.
Right.
It's okay when your friend tells you that a particular brand of iced tea is using urine in their production, to go look that up and find out what the truth is.
What if it's a meme on Facebook and I really want to share it?
Oh, share away.
No,
Okay, don't worry. I mean,
fair game.
Is it funny?
Yeah.
It sort of is funny.
So
iced pea.
Oh, good Lord.
God.
Think this is a good place to bring it down?
Well, I think we're running a little long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're up over an hour mark. I really wanted to get to vaccines.
Right.
That's kind of one of the big ones, but I think vaccines by itself could be like part 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without Spencer.
I am a little. I gotta say, I'm proud of these last 2 episodes. I mean, they've given us hashtag Science Tiger, which I think is gonna.
Right.
I think it's gonna like hang around for a while, and I think we're gonna walk away with hashtag Iced Pea as well.
That one's going to stick to us like you would not believe.
Oh goodness.
So, if you want to reach out to us, we're on Facebook at Medical Stuff. We're on the tweets at Medside Stuff, MEDSIDESTUFF.
You can email us at medsidestuff@yahoo.com.
We're also on Twitter at Medical Stuff 52.
Check us out on iTunes and Google Play.
Also Stitcher and YouTube.
Right?
So have a good evening. Thanks for listening, and toast.
English muffin. It's better.